Tastemakers was funded in part by
In the hands of those who take pride in what they do, something unique can be created. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.
In this episode of Tastemakers, come along with me to the Blue Ridge Mountains, where there is an aquaculture farm that's producing sustainable osetra caviar and smoked sturgeon. I'm Kat Neville, and for the past 2 decades, I've been telling the story of local food. In that time, American food culture has exploded in tiny towns and big cities from coast to coast. In Tastemakers, I explore the maker movement and take you along for the journey to meet the makers who define the flavor of American cuisine. Rich and buttery, caviar is simply salt-cured sturgeon roe, and here in the hills of North Carolina, Marshallberg Farm is sustainably producing osetra caviar using aquaculture.
Aquaculture is the production of seafood in a controlled environment that can be recirculated, that can be flow through, it can be pond aquaculture, so it's the controlled growth of seafood, basically. We can proudly say that we are the largest producer of Russian sturgeon osetra in the United States, but if you look at the numbers, that's really not hard to do because there's not a lot of aquaculture in the United States, and then sturgeon aquaculture is a very rare industry to run into. A sturgeon is a cartilaginous fish, and the only bone structures they have are their scutes and armor around them. They look prehistoric because they are. They have been dated back to the Triassic, 240 million years ago. That's when dinosaurs were still present on planet Earth. So the species of sturgeon is really old. They can withstand large temperature ranges. The Russian sturgeon can handle up to 26 degrees Celsius and as cold as 5 degrees Celsius. So it's really a tough, hardy fish. In the wild, a sturgeon, it can take up to 20 years for them to mature. In a controlled environment for the Russian sturgeon, it's 7 to 10 years until you start seeing the first harvestable eggs.
Edible roe, also known as fish eggs, can come from a number of different species, including paddlefish, salmon, carp, even lobster, but only caviar comes from sturgeon, and it's only called caviar once it's been cured with salt.
The caviar comes from the ovary of the fish. The ovary is removed from the body cavity of the female, then set on ice. The next step is to screen the eggs, which means we are removing the eggs from the connective tissue of the ovary. We rinse it further to remove any flakes of fat and undesirable eggs, little blood clots from the product. After that, we dry the product and we salt it.
So Leanne and I are sitting right actually in the front of the farm. This is where all of the sturgeon are grown, they're raised, and obviously in front of us are 3 tins of beautiful caviar. And what we're going to talk about is really what the different grades are of caviar and the flavors that they have. And this specifically, this is osetra.
Yes.
And so kind of talk about that.
Okay, well, osetra comes exclusively from the Russian sturgeon. And osetra is traditionally renowned for its golden hues. There are many varieties of colors of this caviar, but even if they're dark, there's always this golden hue to it. It's never just black. So with osetra, the more golden the hue, the more coveted the caviar, traditionally.
Does it taste different?
Not particularly, no. All osetra caviar has nutty, buttery, savory undertones, which come out in different ways when it bursts in your mouth. Osetra is also known for its firmness and this sort of sensation of a pop. So the flavor is all very much similar, but it's sort of like when you're going to the market picking out apples for your basket, maybe your eye is drawn a little more to those red, glossier, shinier, bigger apples. It's sort of the same with osetra caviar and the hue, the color. A caviar connoisseur would be more interested in a golden hue.
Interesting. Kind of take me through what each one is.
Okay, so the darker one, we would grade this as a classic grade. This one's superior grade. It's a little bit larger egg with a lighter shade. And then this one is a golden.
It's beautiful.
This would be like the cream of the crop as far as osetra.
And this was harvested yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
It's salty, but not too. And just, it has that beautiful fattiness. I mean, because it's an egg.
Right.
So when you
Right.
think about like an egg yolk or something like that, it has
Yeah.
a similar way that it kind of coats your palate.
Yeah.
The idea of opening
Yeah.
up one of those huge tins of caviar, like at a party, and just people gathering around with champagne. I mean, that to me, it just screams indulgence. But
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to be an indulgence, 'cause it's actually really good for you.
It does. It has a lot of
tons like-
omega-3s,
right.
Protein, no carbs. People oftentimes ask, like, what's in it? What do we put in the caviar? And it's just salt and roe.
Yeah.
We don't use any additives. We don't use any preservatives. And also, we're not hybriding fish or anything like that to create this, like, beautiful, large, egg. We're trying to just mimic how the caviar would taste if it were coming from the wild. The flavor and the quality is what we care about. And yes, it should be 2.4 millimeters, but I would never turn down some osetra because it was 2.3 millimeters.
Neither would I.
We arrive here pretty early. Somebody has to be here at least every 12 hours to make sure everything's okay. We walk through, make sure all of the fish are doing well. We turn all the feeders on, check oxygen levels. We make sure our pumps are operating correctly, the filters are operating correctly. We do some water quality. So that's a typical day. And then of course the elbow grease work of sorting the fish, putting them into the staging tanks, screening them again, harvesting the fish. So it's an endless cycle of activities.
So this is one of two barns.
Yes, it is. This is our second barn, our largest barn with our oldest fish in it.
And so when you say oldest fish, I mean, they're old.
Yes, they're about 12 years the oldest fish in here right now. So all the fish that are sorted come into this barn, and that's where they get screened frequently, and where we ultimately take them into staging and harvest them.
So what I think is really interesting about these fish is that you can't tell looking at the outside whether it's a male or a female, and
No.
so they commingle essentially until maybe they're how old?
About 5 years typically is when we start ultrasounding. So we have to put a probe on their belly and essentially look inside to see the ovary. And that's how we determine whether it's a male or a female.
Unbelievable.
That's the only way.
So every single one of these fish, just like, if you're pregnant, you're using ultrasound to see inside of its body.
Exactly, yes.
I think that people might look at a farm like this and think, oh, you just put the fish in the tank and then you just kind of leave them. There's a lot that you're doing to care for these fish.
Yes, it is a lot of work. It's very labor intensive, and it's difficult because you have to do this in the summer and in the winter in extreme temperatures. So it's definitely, not as fancy as the end product.
Yeah. When people walk through, what's their first question about these fish or about the farm?
How many fish do you have? How big do they get? So we have around 35,000 fish between both facilities. Our fish at harvest are between 20 and 50 pounds, depending on the age and the size of the female, that particular female. So today we harvested a female that was only just barely 20 pounds, but sometimes, you can run into a 50-pounder. So it's really a smaller species of sturgeon compared to other sturgeon species. The Russian sturgeon is petite.
So how do you feed them? What is the method of feeding these animals?
So we use a pelleted diet. It's specifically designed for sturgeon. It's a fast-sinking diet. Sturgeon are bottom feeders. They have no teeth, so they pick up the food entirely from the bottom of the tank. So that's very important. We get the diet from specialized companies, and we work closely with them to make sure it has everything the sturgeon needs to grow. Females are very particular not to accumulate too much fat. That could affect later on the caviar quality. So a long planning process, a long screening process. Already at the age of 2 or 3, you're trying to influence the quality of the caviar 4 years down the road.
So the word aquaculture, I think, is misunderstood. It's an ancient form of farming, but it is something that is happening more and more to kind of meet our ravenous desire for fish. And there are some aquaculture methods that aren't terribly sustainable, but here, what you're doing is you are recycling all of this water. You don't have any effluent discharge.
That's correct. We utilize recirculating technology, which means that we are reusing, in our case, up to 95% of the water. And if you think about this facility alone has around 700,000 gallons volume of water.
Wow.
Imagine you would only use the water once and discharge all of it. How much water that would require? It's impossible. We use well water. That's the preferred method for aquaculture. The quality of the water is stable. The availability is predictable. So groundwater is really the way to go. And there's only a little bit of groundwater here in this area. So we had to rely on this technology, but it has to be done 24/7. Can't really shut it off. So that adds to the planning of an investment like this. You have to imagine 7 to 10 years takes you to get a mature female in your operation, and you have to run these pumps and filters for 7 to 10 years, 24/7.
Yeah, before you get a return on that investment.
Exactly.
Wow. It's really incredible. The level of desire, essentially, to create this product and be part of this sustainable food movement and to experiment with aquaculture and bring it to North Carolina. I mean, we're in the middle of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and there is osetra caviar being raised, but you don't just raise the caviar because the fish that you're harvesting, you use the entire fish. You smoke the fish on site here to make this delicious smoked sturgeon. It's amazing. And then obviously you're selling the meat to chefs like Gavin.
That's right. Sturgeon meat is actually a really popular meat in Europe. Very well known. Oh yeah, sturgeon, let's get some sturgeon tonight. Now here in the States, it's still a new source of protein. And it requires a lot of trial and error and education about the product to prepare it to the American palate. And Gavin has done very well proving that that's possible. Not everything has to be chicken or beef. We can explore other protein sources as well.
And now we're here in Asheville at the greenhouse where Chef Gavin Baker is sourcing whole sturgeon from the farm and breaking them down on site. Let's get in the kitchen and check it out.
As a chef, we want to work with whole fish because we know how fresh it is. We know that it's been taken care of. Oftentimes in our world, if you just order fillets, you don't know who's handled that or how they've handled that. And the integrity of the product as well as the process and each step along the way is very important to me. So I want to be able to control as much of that as possible. My connection with Sabina makes that possible because I know that she takes care of her fish and I know that it's a quality, sustainable product.
Wow, it's massive. It's absolutely beautiful.
They are beautiful fish.
So, as a chef, you went to culinary school. You've learned how to break down fish. They don't teach you this in culinary school.
They definitely don't. So the process that we go through here is we remove this fin, and then we cut just behind it.
Okay.
Sometimes in front of it. The smaller the fish, the less usable chop you can get down here. So this portion from the back on, we'll smoke and use that in, say, like a whitefish salad or something for brunch. And your main chops, just like on a rack of beef, are going to be in this section here. You got to look at your striations on the side because you want to make sure that you go right through those. And it's got this really incredible fat content in it.
Unbelievable.
You can see those yellow striations of fat.
Then this is the point where you kind of roll it up into this shape.
We remove the fins, and then we use a much bigger saw to get through here. And then we end up with our bullet. This is what we put in the freezer right here.
You freeze it to tenderize it.
The water molecules inside of it will convert to ice. And then those tiny little ice crystals will make little cuts. For the sturgeon, it's pretty necessary because it is a very, very tough fish. And it also makes it so that we can cut it. So we have to cut this on the bandsaw.
Gavin just pulled these sturgeon chops out of this wood burning oven. What I love about your approach is that it is so southern, but it's using this totally unusual protein, this seafood that doesn't normally come from here, but it's it's raised 90 miles away.
Sure. It's barbecue at its heart. I mean, my roots are southern. My tastes are global. And we just wanted to bring that in and sort of, get as much flavor as we could in a small plate using a fish that is a viable, local, sustainable protein source and create an outlet for it. And the response has been fantastic.
So you have this dry rub, a bourbon peach barbecue sauce, and the squash underneath. All of these different layers with the bitterness of the frisee and that pop of the acid from that vinaigrette. I mean, it's kind of like every single flavor profile that you're looking for in a dish seems to be represented here. We're looking for that perfect roundness in the dish. I think we've come close. Well, I think we're gonna have to try it. It's delicious. It has the texture of like a really nicely marbled piece of pork in a way. Sure. And so using that barbecue application makes perfect sense. That is delicious. Yeah, thank you. It's really good. Who knew? Sturgeon from North Carolina? I think a lot of people, when they come in, they've never heard of sturgeon. Yeah. Or they're not willing to try it. And then once they try it, though, they're converted. Yes. Tasting this would definitely convert you. We are slowly converting the populace, chop by chop. I love it. The local farmers market is probably the last place you'd expect to find osetra caviar and smoked sturgeon, but here in Boone, North Carolina, it's available right next to other local products like beets and lettuce.
We had this idea to join the Watauga County Farmers Market early this year. We thought, hey, let's give it a go. Why not? We're local, just like a vegetable farmer is. Yeah, you want to be a little closer. Hey, good morning. Got some smoked fish here if you want to give it a go.
The type of foods that we sell here has always been from the land, so what farmers are growing on their land. And so having a new vendor that sells fish from the north, sturgeon and caviar, has been outstanding.
We're just having a blast up there. We run into people that, first of all, don't know about us, they don't know about caviar, they don't know about aquaculture, and it's really been a very educational thing to do. It's all done in-house, locally, 30 minutes from here, and the fish are raised there as well. Would you like to try?
I will try it.
Yeah. Where do you import this from? That is the main question I'm getting. Where is this imported from? And then I tell them, It's not imported. It's actually from 30 minutes down the road. And the jaws drop and they are just completely surprised that that's even possible.
I'd like one of those.
Yep, okay. Thank you, thanks for trying.
Sturgeon live for about 50 or 60 years and they don't start spawning until they're at least 7. There are a number of subspecies that range across the globe north of the equator, and because of pollution, overfishing, and of course habitat destruction, aquaculture farms like this are the only sustainable source for sturgeon caviar.
If we want to eat meat, we have to farm in order to feed the world population. And we have very limited fresh water on this earth. That makes recirculating aquaculture so important. Secondly, sturgeon in particular, along with other fish species, are endangered. Wild populations of sturgeon are being overexploited. The fish is removed from the water, killed. Does it have anything? No. Throw it out of the boat. It's terrible. So we are making a product that is really high quality and super tasty, that is up to par with the wild caviar from the former days, in order to completely counter this. We want to see wild populations survive. That's our objective. Another thing is making the food. You are making food that other people get to enjoy. And there is nothing more rewarding than that to me. It's very spiritual, actually.
We're going to wrap the episode here at Petit Philippe in Charlotte, where Mark is going to show us how to serve caviar at home.
Mark is very knowledgeable when it comes to the caviar and pairing the caviar with wine and champagne. He really wants to showcase the best thing that we have to offer, along with the best thing that he has to offer.
Caviar, it's this wonderful kind of rarefied product, and it might seem a little bit intimidating to just go pick some up and actually enjoy it in your home. But this is something that is so simple, and especially if you're pairing it with the right beverage, it's a wonderful way to indulge.
Indeed, I think it's a very beautiful, perfect product.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it really goes with wine, and it goes with so much before and after dinner.
Absolutely. So tell us how you have this set up.
The classic is the briny. It's basically just a glorified pancake, right? You can go with the British wafer crackers that are lovely, and then the classic toast points. And here you've got a couple different styles, you know. And then of course there's the potato chip, which you gotta love because the salt's there, right? All that lovely oil, and just who doesn't like chips, right?
Yes.
There's creme fraiche, and then you have all these other lovely things that you can, you know, basically combine with the transportation device, right, if you will.
How are you going to build yours?
I'm going to go kind of classic, softer into more crunch, and I've designed these 3 little items here, kind of like the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost here. We've got, you know, of the caviar world, but egg whites, you know, a little bit of yolk here that's also chopped up, and then some finely diced shallot. So I'm going to start with the egg white on the briny.
What are you pairing it with first?
We're going to start off with a little blanc de blanc. The idea here is 100% Chardonnay.
Oh, it's so delicious.
We're going to move on to our kind of fun second combination here. This is a rosé, so I think the fruit combined with, you know, a little bit of fat and the yolk here is going to be a great combination.
Wow. What I love about this is that the caviar is not diminished. It stands out. It's enhanced by these other flavors.
We're gonna pour you a little bit of this Roeder Stark. This does have Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Meunier. So this is your classic split with all 3 varieties. But the difference is it's a Brut Nature. So I think for this, we should definitely go with the chip, right?
I agree. It's my favorite way to eat it. it just really plays so beautifully with the flavor of the caviar.
So whether you want the crunch or whether you want something a little softer, that kind of nice snap with that elegance and that kind of Irish butter coming from the sea moment, it's pretty insane.
It is.
So that's why we do it.
Thank you, Mark.
It's a pleasure.
Oh, wonderful to stop by.
Cheers.
Cheers. For recipes, outtakes, and for some wine picks from Mark, as well as more information about Marshallberg Farms and all of the makers that we're covering in this series, just head to wearetastemakers.com. Thank you for joining me here in North Carolina, and I will see you next time. Connect with us online at wearetastemakers.com or through social media on these handles.
Tastemakers was funded in part by
In the hands of those who take pride in what they do, something unique can be created. Edward Jones is proud to support the craftspeople who define the maker movement.